A 6-year-old girl clutched a rag doll on the sidewalk under a light drizzle. Her eyes were red, but she smiled at passers-by, offering the toy for a few quarters. "It's to buy medicine for my grandma. She's coughing up blood." Most people looked away, quickened their pace, pretended not to hear. Until a luxury car stopped right there and a man in a dark suit stepped out, his expression cold, and shoes that cost more than that little girl would earn in years. He looked at the doll and then knelt down. Subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories delivered daily. The millionaire adjusted his imported silk tie as he watched the city through the tinted windows of his car. Outside, New York City was drowning in yet another rainy afternoon. Inside the vehicle reigned the silence that had become his only constant companion for years. Only the occasional ring of his cell phone interrupted the quiet. Always business calls, never personal. "Sir, we've arrived at headquarters," the driver announced, parking the imported vehicle along the curb. He nodded without responding. His eyes, already devoid of any expression beyond the calculating determination that had tripled his inherited fortune, landed on the documents he was holding. Another company about to be absorbed. Another competitor that would succumb to his ruthless strategy. "Cancel the meeting," he said suddenly. "I need to stretch my legs." The driver, surprised by the sudden change, simply agreed. In 15 years of service, he had never seen his boss postpone a deal. Something was different that day. The millionaire stepped out of the vehicle, feeling the light rain touch his face. He didn't mind. He walked a few steps along the sidewalk, observing the city he had helped transform, but of which he had never truly been a part. Enormous corporate buildings, many with his name emblazoned on the facades, rose like monuments to his obsession with success and control. That's when he saw her. Huddled under the awning of an abandoned storefront, the girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Dark, disheveled hair framed a small face, marked by a mixture of innocence and a precocious maturity that didn't belong at that age. In her small, cold, purple hands, she held what appeared to be a rag doll, raising it timidly to the hurried passers-by who ignored her existence. "It's to buy medicine for my grandma," he heard her say to a middle-aged man who quickened his pace, pretending not to see her. "She's coughing up blood." Something strange happened inside the millionaire's chest. A tightness, a feeling forgotten for so long that he barely recognized it. For a moment, he saw in the eyes of that child the reflection of another, his son, at 6 years old, playing in the garden of the mansion before life was taken from him by a relentless disease that no fortune could stop. Without realizing it, his steps led him to her. "How much?" he asked, surprising himself with the softness in his voice that he hadn't used in years. The girl looked up, first startled, then hopeful. $2, mister," she replied, extending the doll made of colorful scraps and buttons. "But if you only have one, I'll take that too." The millionaire looked at that simple toy. It was just a pile of old fabrics sewn together with obvious affection, but made with a childlike skill. 2 mismatched buttons formed the eyes, and red lines drew a smile on the doll's face. Without hesitation, he knelt on the wet sidewalk, completely ignoring the $5,000 Italian suit that was now touching the dirty concrete. "Is your grandmother very sick?" he asked, feeling a vulnerability that he hadn't experienced since his son's funeral more than a decade ago. The child nodded, biting her lower lip to hold back tears. "She's coughing up a lot of blood. The neighbor said there's medicine at the drugstore, but it's expensive." The millionaire realized that around him, people were passing by, looking curiously at the unusual scene. One of the most powerful men in the country kneeling in the rain, talking to a street girl. He didn't care. At that moment, there was only him, the child, and a rag doll that inexplicably seemed more valuable than all his possessions. "What's your name?" asked the millionaire, still kneeling before the girl. She hesitated, as if she had been taught to distrust strangers. "Grandma says I shouldn't talk to people I don't know," she replied, clutching the doll to her chest. A rare smile appeared on the man's face. "Your grandmother is right," he agreed, getting up slowly. "Where do you live?" The child pointed vaguely to a side street. "Over there in the empty lot, behind the yellow wall," she explained naturally, as if she didn't fully understand her own precarious situation. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. He knew that area well, an abandoned lot that his own development company had acquired months ago for a future project. The illegal settlements were a problem that his advisors mentioned in passing, assuring him that it would be resolved before construction began. "Can I see your grandmother?" he asked, surprised by his own words. The driver, who was watching the scene from afar, approached discreetly. "Sir, your meeting... it's cancelled." The millionaire cut him off without taking his eyes off the girl. "All of today's meetings are cancelled." The child looked at him suspiciously. "Are you a doctor?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I know doctors. Good doctors." After a moment of hesitation, the girl nodded and began to walk, still holding her doll firmly. The millionaire signaled for the driver to follow them at a distance. As they walked, the contrast between the two could not have been more evident. He with his impeccable suit, a watch that cost the price of an apartment, and handmade Italian shoes. She with a faded dress, plastic sandals mended with duct tape, and hair that clearly hadn't seen a comb in days. Dodging puddles and accumulated trash, they eventually reached a narrow alley that led to a vast lot surrounded by a worn wall. An improvised opening in the concrete served as an entrance to what appeared to be a small shantytown. "This is where we live," the girl explained simply, passing through the opening with the ease of someone who knows every stone in the path. The millionaire hesitated briefly. That territory was technically his property, but he had never set foot on it. He followed the child, having to bend down to pass through the narrow opening in the wall. The interior revealed a reality that, although he knew existed, he had never witnessed so closely. Dozens of makeshift dwellings of wood, tarps and corrugated iron were scattered across the lot. Children played in puddles of mud, while adults tried to protect small vegetable patches from the persistent rain. "Grandma's in that one over there," the girl indicated, pointing to a shack further away, partially covered with a faded blue tarp. As they approached, the millionaire felt the curious and distrustful gazes of the residents. His presence there was like that of an alien in unknown territory. Reaching the entrance of the shack, the girl entered first, announcing in a voice that tried to sound cheerful, "Grandma, I brought someone who wants to help." The interior of the small dwelling was suffocating. The smell of mildew mixed with the odor of illness. On a thin mattress, covered with worn but clean sheets, lay an elderly woman of indefinable age. She could have been 60 or 80 years. Old poverty and disease had stolen any precision from that estimate. Upon seeing the elegant stranger at the door of her humble abode, the old woman tried to rise, only to be seized by a violent coughing fit. The millionaire saw, horrified, the blood that stained the tissue she brought to her lips. "Who are you?" the grandmother asked in a weak voice after the coughing subsided. Before he could answer, he felt something touch his hand. The girl had placed the rag doll between his fingers. "You're going to buy it, right?" she asked with pleading eyes. "To buy Grandma's medicine." The millionaire looked at the doll in his hand, then at the hopeful child, and finally at the sick old woman. At that moment, his entire empire, all his achievements, all the power he had accumulated, seemed utterly insignificant. "I'm not going," "To buy your doll," said the millionaire after a long silence. The girl's face crumbled, tears beginning to form in the corners of her eyes. The grandmother, despite her weakness, extended her trembling hand towards her granddaughter in a protective gesture. "Please leave," murmured the old woman with surprising dignity. "We have nothing that interests you." The millionaire raised his hand in a pacifying gesture. "I'm not going to buy the doll," he repeated, "because that's not what you need." He took his phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. "I need a private ambulance, immediately," he ordered. He provided the approximate location and hung up. Then he made another call. "Dr. Mendez, I need you to prepare a full team. I'm bringing in a patient. Yes, it's an emergency." The grandmother looked at him with distrust and confusion. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago," he replied, without knowing exactly what he meant by that. While they waited, the millionaire sat on the only chair in the shack, a fragile piece that creaked under his weight. The girl remained beside her grandmother, caressing her grey hair tenderly. "Why?" asked the old woman suddenly. "Why are you helping us?" The millionaire contemplated the question. Why, indeed? In his mind, distant images appeared and disappeared. His young son holding a teddy bear, his wife smiling before cancer consumed her, the emptiness of the mansion after. They were both gone. "Because I can," he replied finally. It was a simple but incomplete truth. 20 minutes later, professional paramedics carefully entered the shack. Efficiently, they transferred the old woman to a state-of-the-art stretcher. The girl watched everything with wide eyes, the rag doll again in her hands, clutched against her chest. "Where are you taking my grandma?" she asked in a trembling voice. The millionaire knelt again, getting down to the child's eye level. "To a hospital where they will take very good care of her." He hesitated before adding, "You're coming along, of course." During the journey in the ambulance equipped with state-of-the-art technology, the millionaire watched the interaction between the girl and her grandmother. There was genuine, pure love there, which he hadn't experienced in years. The child held the old woman's hand, whispering words of comfort that seemed to reverse the natural roles between them. At the most exclusive private hospital in the city, the millionaire's arrival caused immediate commotion. Employees rushed to meet his demands, while the grandmother was quickly taken for tests. "Sir," the hospital director approached discreetly, "we need the patient's information for admission, and there are matters of..." He hesitated, looking at the simple clothes of the girl and the old woman. "Payment to consider." The look he received was so icy that he recoiled instinctively. "Send the bill to me," replied the millionaire. "Provide the best room, the best team, and I want hourly reports." While the grandmother was undergoing tests, the millionaire and the girl waited in a private room. He watched the child who, exhausted, had fallen asleep in a comfortable armchair, still clutching the rag doll. His personal assistant arrived in a hurry, carrying a briefcase. "Sir, I managed to postpone 3 meetings, but the board is demanding your presence for tomorrow's vote, and the lawyer called twice about the eviction process of that lot," where he stopped abruptly, looking at the sleeping girl. "Cancel everything," ordered the millionaire, "and shelve that eviction process permanently." "But sir, the shopping mall project, we'll find another lot," he cut him off sharply. When the doctor finally appeared, his expression was grave. "It's tuberculosis in an advanced stage," he informed in a low voice so as not to wake the child. "She will need intensive treatment, prolonged hospitalization, and there are significant kidney complications." The millionaire nodded. "Do whatever is necessary. Cost is no object." The doctor hesitated. "There's one more thing. Legally, we need to notify Child Protective Services about the child. Living in those conditions..." The millionaire felt a tightness in his chest. "She will stay with me," he said, surprised by his own resolution. "Sir, with all due respect, there are legal procedures. You are not a relative, you can't just—" "Then make it legal," he interrupted. "I have dozens of lawyers. Use them." At that moment, the girl woke up, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" she asked in a small voice. The millionaire sat down beside her. "We're going to do everything we can to make her okay," he promised. Looking at the rag doll in the child's hands, he made a decision that would change his life forever. The next morning, the millionaire woke up with a jolt, feeling a pain in his back. He had spent the night in the hospital armchair. Something unthinkable for someone who slept exclusively on imported mattresses and Egyptian cotton sheets. Beside him, wrapped in a hospital blanket, the girl was still sleeping soundly, the rag doll firm in her embrace. He blinked a few times, reorienting himself. The events of the previous day seemed surreal, as if he had momentarily entered someone else's life. And yet, here he was, crumpled in a hospital armchair, watching over the sleep of a child who until yesterday was a complete stranger. His cell phone vibrated discreetly. Dozens of unread messages, missed calls, urgent emails. His empire demanded attention. For a moment, the old instinct for absolute control returned, that need to command every aspect of his business that had made him so successful and so lonely. The girl stirred, murmuring something in her sleep. The millionaire hesitated, then silenced his phone and put it away. A nurse entered quietly, surprised to see the powerful businessman in such an informal situation. "Good morning, sir. The patient is stable. The doctor will be by soon to talk." "And what about—" He gestured towards the sleeping girl. "The hospital's social services have been notified," the nurse informed him in a low voice. "They should be here this morning to assess the situation." The millionaire nodded, feeling an unexpected apprehension. The idea that they could take the child to some institutional shelter caused him a visceral discomfort that he couldn't explain. The door opened again, and his personal assistant entered, carrying a large bag. "I brought the clothes you asked for, sir," he said, handing him the bag. "Children's clothes, as requested, and some changes for you too." The millionaire thanked him with a nod. It was strange. He couldn't remember the last time he had thanked someone for something. "The board is in an uproar," continued the assistant in a confidential tone. "The news that you cancelled the decisive meeting for the project has spread. There are rumors about your health, possible scandals. I need guidance on how to proceed." "Tell them I'm perfectly fine," he replied dryly, "and that they will hear from me soon." When the assistant left, the girl finally woke up, rubbing her eyes with her small hands. For a moment, she seemed confused by the unfamiliar environment, but then her eyes met the millionaire's, and she visibly relaxed. "Good morning," he said, surprised by the softness in his own voice. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded shyly. "Where's my grandma?" "She's being taken care of by the doctors. We can see her soon." He indicated the bag beside him. "I brought some clothes for you, and then we can have breakfast." The girl blinked, looking at the bag with curiosity. When the millionaire opened it, revealing new children's clothes, dresses, pants, blouses, all still with tags from expensive stores, her eyes widened. "Are those for me?" she asked incredulously. "Yes," he confirmed. "Choose what you want to wear." With hesitant hands, the child touched the soft fabrics as if they were precious treasures. She chose a simple blue cotton dress and looked at the millionaire expectantly. He realized the dilemma. "I'll call someone to help you get changed." A nurse assisted the girl, while the millionaire took the opportunity to make a private call. "I need you to prepare the documents for an emergency temporary guardianship," he instructed his lead attorney. "Yes, of a child. No, I don't have all the details yet. Use your contacts. Do what is necessary." When the girl returned, transformed by the new clothes and combed hair, the millionaire felt something strange in his chest, a type of pride that he hadn't experienced since his son was alive. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She nodded vigorously, provoking a genuine smile on the man's face. In the hospital's private dining room, the millionaire watched, fascinated, as the child savored every bite of a nutritious breakfast, probably the first full meal she had had in days. There was a simple gratitude in her gestures that touched him deeply. "Is my grandma going to eat good food like this too?" she asked between bites. "Yes, as soon as she can," he assured her. A social worker arrived when they were finishing breakfast. She introduced herself politely, but the millionaire noticed the evaluative look she cast at the interaction between him and the girl. "We need to talk about the next steps," said the professional. "The child will need a suitable shelter while her grandmother is hospitalized. She will stay with me," affirmed the millionaire with a certainty that he didn't know he possessed until he spoke the words. The social worker smiled politely. "I appreciate your generosity, sir, but there are legal procedures. You are not a relative. There is no established bond." "I am aware of the procedures," he interrupted. "My lawyers are already taking care of it." The girl looked from one to the other, clutching the rag doll to her chest, the fear growing. In her eyes, seeing her discomfort, the millionaire softened his voice. "No one is going to separate you from your grandmother," he assured her. "I promise." It was a risky promise, he knew, but something inside him was determined to fulfill it, regardless of the obstacles. 2 weeks had passed since that first encounter on the sidewalk. The transformation in the millionaire's life was visible to anyone who knew him. His penthouse office had been partially converted into a makeshift children's space. Executives, in suits and ties, now shared the waiting room, with a rag doll carefully placed on its own chair. The grandmother remained hospitalized, but was responding well to treatment. The resistant tuberculosis required intensive care, and the doctors predicted a slow but promising recovery. As for the girl, a temporary guardianship arrangement had been established after a small fortune in legal fees and a few strategic calls to judges and authorities. It wasn't an adoption, not yet, but it allowed her to remain under the care of the millionaire while her grandmother recovered. "The quarterly report is ready for review," announced his secretary, placing a folder on the table. The millionaire nodded distractedly, his eyes fixed on the girl, who was drawing intently at the other end of the room. He had hired a private tutor to begin her literacy, discovering that, despite never having attended formal school, the child was extraordinarily intelligent. "And the board requests your presence at tomorrow's meeting," continued the secretary. "There are concerns about the shopping mall project that was cancelled." "Tell them I have other plans for that lot," he replied. "My new social project advisor will present the concept next week." The secretary raised her eyebrows, but didn't comment. Everyone in the company had noticed the changes in the boss's behavior, from the sudden creation of a social responsibility department to his new policy of arriving later and leaving the office earlier. "What are you drawing?" asked the millionaire, approaching the child after the secretary left. "Our family," she replied simply, showing a drawing where 3 stick figures, one small, one medium, and one tall, were holding hands. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. "It's very beautiful," he managed to say. "That's Grandma," the girl explained, pointing to the medium figure. "That's you," she indicated the tallest one, "and that's me." "And who is this 4th figure?" he asked, noticing a small shape in the corner of the paper. "That's my doll," she replied with a smile. "She's family too." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was the hospital. The millionaire answered quickly, listening attentively, his face gradually lighting up. "Great news," he announced as he hung up. "Your grandmother is much better today. The doctors said we can visit her for longer. The girl's smile lit up the entire room. At the hospital, the contrast between the millionaire and the child had decreased significantly. He no longer seemed out of place, holding her small hand as they walked through the corridors. The nurses smiled when they saw them, accustomed to the daily presence of the unusual duo. The grandmother was sitting in bed, visibly stronger than in previous weeks. Her face, once ashen, was regaining some color, and her eyes lit up when she saw her granddaughter. "Grandma!" exclaimed the girl, running to hug her carefully. "Look what I drew for you!" While the child proudly showed her drawing, the doctor discreetly signaled to the millionaire, calling him into the hallway. "The results are promising," he informed him. "The lung infection is responding to treatment, although more slowly than we would like. But there's another issue." He hesitated briefly. "We found a suspicious mass on the kidney scan. We need to investigate further." The millionaire nodded gravely. "Run all the necessary tests and bring in specialists if necessary." Back in the room, he observed the interaction between grandmother and granddaughter, the palpable love between them, the way the old woman, despite her weakness, made a point of combing the girl's hair with trembling fingers. "You have been very good to us," said the grandmother when the child was distracted with a picture book. "I can never repay what you are doing." "There's nothing to repay," replied the millionaire, sitting beside the bed. "Why are you doing all this?" asked the old woman directly. "No one does so much for strangers without a reason." The millionaire contemplated the question for a moment. "I used to have a family too," he said finally, "a son, about her age." Understanding softened the woman's gaze. "What happened?" "Leukemia," he replied, the word still painful even after so many years. "My wife couldn't bear the loss. She passed away a year later." A sympathetic silence hung between them. "She has the same look," continued the millionaire almost in a whisper. "The same curiosity, the same joy, despite all the difficulties." The grandmother extended a wrinkled hand, briefly touching the rich man's, in a gesture of empathy that crossed all the social barriers that would normally separate them. "Children have that gift," she said softly, "to bring light even to the darkest places." The millionaire nodded, watching the girl absorbed in her book, the rag doll faithfully by her side. He knew he had crossed a point of no return. He couldn't go back to his previous life, to the gilded loneliness that was, slowly consuming him. However, new challenges were approaching. Child Protective Services was still monitoring the situation closely. His lawyers warned about the legal obstacles to permanent guardianship, and his shareholders were beginning to question his recent sentimental business decisions, as some called them. But looking at the small, makeshift family before him, the millionaire knew that he would fight against any obstacle. "Sir, I brought the documents you requested." The private investigator placed a folder on the office table. "I managed to track down the complete history." The millionaire looked at the clock. It was past midnight. The girl was sleeping soundly in a makeshift room in the adjacent space. In recent weeks, his penthouse had been transformed to accommodate the childish presence that surprisingly had brought more life to that space than all the luxury items accumulated over the years. "What did you find out?" he asked, opening the folder carefully, as if fearing what he might find. "The story is complicated," replied the investigator. "The child was born at County General Hospital 6 years ago. The mother passed away during childbirth due to complications. With no father registered, the grandmother assumed guardianship." The millionaire nodded, leafing through the documents. Birth certificate, mother's death certificate, sparse school records. "The interesting part," continued the investigator, "is about the girl's mother." He pointed to a photograph attached to the report. "She worked as a receptionist at one of your hotels about 7 years ago." The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins as he looked at the photograph. A young woman of perhaps 20-something, dark hair, and a shy smile that seemed strangely familiar. But that wasn't what shocked him. It was the undeniable resemblance to his late son. "That's impossible," he murmured, his hands suddenly trembling. "There's more," said the investigator, leaning forward to turn the page. "As requested, we performed a DNA test comparing the child's samples with the genetic material from my son that we keep in the stem cell bank," completed the millionaire, his voice almost inaudible. "Exactly. The results are on the last page." With his heart racing, the millionaire slowly turned the pages until he reached the laboratory report. The confirmation was there, in unequivocal scientific terms. 99.99998% probability of paternity. The girl was his granddaughter. His son, before succumbing to the disease, had fathered a daughter he never knew. A child who lived in poverty while he, the grandfather, accumulated fortunes in his tower of solitude. "The mother never contacted the family?" he asked, struggling to maintain his composure. "From what I could gather, she tried. There are records of 3 attempts to contact your company, all blocked by security screening." The investigator paused. "Apparently, many people try to claim links to you for financial motivations. Your security protocols are quite strict." The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling an overwhelming weight of guilt. The same protocols he had created to protect himself from the world had prevented him from knowing about the existence of his own granddaughter. "And the grandmother? Does she know?" "Everything indicates that she does. We found a diary among her belongings in the shack. Her daughter told her mother about the relationship with your son shortly before passing away. The grandmother tried to make contact a few times, but eventually gave up. Apparently, she feared that you might take custody of the girl." A solitary tear rolled down the face of the normally impassive man. He got up and walked to the door of the makeshift room, watching the child sleeping peacefully, embraced by the rag doll. His granddaughter, blood of his blood, the last link to his son. "No one else knows about this?" he asked, still with his back to the investigator. "Only me and the lab technician, who signed a confidentiality agreement, as requested." "Good. Keep it that way for now." After the investigator left, the millionaire remained for hours watching the girl sleep, lost in thought. Memories of his son mingled with images of the child he had now discovered was his granddaughter. The coincidence, or perhaps fate, that had brought them together seemed too profound to be understood. The next morning, he went to the hospital, earlier than usual. He needed to talk to the grandmother, his unexpected connection through the child they both loved. He found the old woman awake, looking significantly better after weeks of intensive treatment. "Good morning," he greeted, sitting beside the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "A little better each day," she replied with a tired smile. "Where's my little granddaughter? With her tutor, I thought we needed to talk alone." Something in his tone must have alerted the old woman, because her expression changed, a shadow of apprehension crossing her face. "I found something out yesterday," began the millionaire, carefully choosing his words. "Something about the girl's mother and about my son." The old woman's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked softly, without accusation. "All this time you knew who I was, who she is." The grandmother closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. "Yes," she admitted finally. "My daughter told me everything before she passed. The romance with your son, the pregnancy he never knew. Why did you never contact me directly?" A sad smile formed on the old woman's lips. "I tried, in the beginning, but how would a poor woman get to the most inaccessible man in the city? Your security guards, secretaries, assistants, they all saw me as just another gold digger." The millionaire lowered his head, ashamed. "Afterward," she continued, I was afraid that you would use your power and money to take my little granddaughter away from me. She was all I had left in the world. I would never—" "You don't know what it's like to be poor and powerless," interrupted the woman with serene dignity. "You don't know what it's like to fear that at any moment someone more powerful can decide your fate." A heavy silence fell between them. The millionaire realized with painful clarity the abyss that his power and wealth had created, not only between him and the world, but between him and his own family. "What are you going to do now?" asked the grandmother finally. The fear evident in her voice. The millionaire reflected deeply before answering. "She is my granddaughter," he said at last. "The last piece of my son that remains in this world. But she is also your granddaughter, and you are the only mother she has ever known." He extended his hand, gently touching the old woman's arm. "I will not separate you ever, but I would like to be part of her life, officially, as her grandfather." Tears began to stream down the woman's wrinkled face. "She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know her legacy. We will tell her together," proposed the millionaire, "when you are better, when the time is right." In that hospital room, two people from completely different worlds found a common ground. Through their love for a child, a new family, improvised and unexpected, was beginning to take shape. A week after the discovery, the millionaire called a press conference that shocked the business world. Dozens of journalists crowded into the auditorium of his company headquarters, speculating about the reason for the sudden announcement. "Thank you for being here," he began, his posture impeccable, contrasting with something new in his eyes. A softness, a humanity that the reporters who had known him for years had never witnessed. "Today, I'm announcing two decisions. First, I am creating the Rebirth Foundation with an initial endowment of $200 million dedicated to supporting vulnerable seniors and the children in their care." Flashes popped as the journalists scribbled frantically. A philanthropic initiative of this size was news, especially coming from a businessman known for his ruthlessness in business. Second, I'm selling my stake in United Towers Development. The proceeds will be redirected to social housing projects. A murmur swept through the auditorium. United Towers represented nearly a third of the millionaire's wealth. It was the crown jewel of his empire. "Questions?" he offered after a moment of calculated silence. A forest of hands went up. The millionaire pointed to a journalist in the front row. "Does this radical change have anything to do with the girl who has been seen with you recently?" she asked directly. "There are rumors that you are seeking to adopt a child from a humble background." The millionaire hesitated for only a second. "My personal life remains private," he replied firmly. "Next question." But it was too late. The seed had been planted, and the press, hungry for a human story behind the faceless tycoon, would not rest. In the following days, photographers began to haunt the hospital and his residence. Tabloids speculated about the identity of the child. Some more sensationalist ones hinted at dark motivations for his sudden interest in a poor girl. "This is getting out of control," commented his lead attorney, placing several newspapers on the office table. The headlines ranged from the sympathetic "Millionaire adopts orphan" to the absurd "Tycoon and the mysterious child. What's the secret behind?" "Ignore them," replied the millionaire, focused on a colorful drawing the girl had made that morning. "It's not that simple," insisted the lawyer. Child Protective Services is receiving pressure. They are questioning whether the media environment around you is healthy for a child. The millionaire raised his eyes, a hard expression returning briefly to his face. "Are you suggesting that they might try to take her from me?" "I'm saying we need to be careful, very careful." That afternoon, upon picking up the girl from the piano lesson she had recently started, the millionaire noticed 3 photographers strategically positioned near the school. "Let's take another route today," he said to the child, quickly leading her to the car, waiting in the back of the building. "Why are those people taking pictures of us?" she asked innocently. "Some people are very curious," he replied, trying to keep his voice light. "Don't worry about it." But the forced tranquility didn't last long. Upon arriving at the penthouse, they found his personal assistant waiting with a grave expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, while the girl ran to show her new books to the housekeeper. "It's the grandmother," replied the assistant in a low voice. "The hospital called. There have been complications." 20 minutes later, they were in the ICU hallway, watching doctors and nurses moving hurriedly around the old woman's bed. The kidney failure that the tests had detected had progressed rapidly, complicated by a hospital infection. "We need to be honest," said the head doctor in private. "The situation is extremely serious. We're doing everything we can, but it would be wise to prepare the child." The millionaire felt as if the floor disappeared beneath his feet. Just now, when they were finally beginning to form a family, when the truth about the blood tie that united them was about to be revealed. "She knows that she's my granddaughter," he declared, his eyes fixed on the unconscious old woman beyond the glass. "I told her a few days ago, sir. She wanted the girl to know the truth, to know her legacy." The doctor nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. "We'll do everything in our power." Upon returning to the waiting room, he found the girl sitting quietly, the rag doll firmly in her lap. There was an understanding in her eyes that seemed far beyond her age, as if somehow she sensed the gravity of the situation. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" she asked when he sat down beside her. The millionaire hesitated. He had spent his entire life negotiating, manipulating information, telling people exactly what he needed to say to get what he wanted. But before that child, his granddaughter, he felt that he needed to offer something that he had rarely given anyone: the sincere truth. "The doctors are doing everything they can," he began carefully. "But your grandmother is very, very sick." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she squeezed the doll tighter against her chest. "If she goes to heaven," said the child in a low voice, "who will take care of me?" The question hit the millionaire like a physical blow. "I will," he promised, holding her small, cold hands between his. "I will always take care of you." "But what if they take you away too?" she asked, the fear showing in her voice. "I heard the lady from Child Protective Services saying that you're not my real relative." The millionaire felt a wave of anger and frustration. How to explain to a 6-year-old the legal complexities, the investigation, the DNA tests, and the truth about their kinship? "I am your grandfather," he affirmed with conviction. "Your father's father, and no one ever will separate me from you." At that moment, his cell phone vibrated. It was a message from his investigator. "Urgent, they found out. Front page tomorrow." The world was about to discover the truth, and not all the fortunes in the world could control the media storm that was approaching. The headline blazed across all the morning newspapers. "Unexpected IRS. Millionaire discovers granddaughter living in poverty." Accompanying the sensationalist text, photos of the girl with her rag doll, side by side with images of the millionaire's deceased son in his youth. The resemblance between them, highlighted by red circles, was undeniable. "How did this leak?" asked the millionaire furiously as his crisis team gathered in the mansion's conference room. "The lab technician," explained the head of security. "Apparently, $100,000 bought the confidentiality agreement he signed." The lead attorney nervously flipped through the different newspapers. "We already have interview requests from all the major national and international outlets. The tabloids are offering absurd amounts for exclusive information, and Child Protective Services has called an emergency hearing for tomorrow." "What about the grandmother?" asked the press secretary. "Stable but critical," replied the millionaire, rubbing his tired eyes. He hadn't slept all night, divided between the hospital and the emergency calls. "The girl is with the housekeeper. She doesn't know anything yet." "Sir," intervened the press secretary, "we need a strategy. The silence is being interpreted as confirmation. We suggest an exclusive, controlled interview where you can expose your version of the facts." The millionaire shook his head. "I will not expose my granddaughter to this circus." "With all due respect," insisted the secretary, "the circus has already begun. It's now a matter of deciding whether we'll be the lion tamers or the animals." Before he could answer, the door of the room opened. It was the housekeeper with a distressed expression. "Sir, sorry to interrupt, but there are people at the door. Many people. Reporters, photographers." The girl saw the pictures on the tablet. "She's asking—" The millionaire stood up abruptly. "Meeting adjourned. Prepare the documents for tomorrow's hearing. I want the best family law specialists available." He found the child huddled in the corner of the room, hugging the doll, silent tears streaming down her face. On the table next to her, a tablet showed the news story with the comparative photos. "Are you really my grandfather?" she asked in a small voice when he knelt before her. The millionaire felt his heart clench. This wasn't how he had planned to tell her. This wasn't how the truth should have come to light. "Yes," he replied softly. "Your father was my son. He never knew about you, and I only found out recently." The girl absorbed the information, her small face processing emotions too complex for her age. "Why is everyone taking pictures of us? Why are they saying bad things?" "Because some people," he explained patiently, "get very curious about other people's lives, especially when it involves—" He hesitated, searching for simple words. "Money and secrets." The girl nodded, as if she understood more than she should. "The lady from Child Protective Services came here while you were at the hospital. She asked if I was happy living with you." The millionaire felt a chill. "And what did you say?" A small smile appeared among the tears. "That you make bad pancakes for breakfast, but that you tell good stories at bedtime." Despite the tension, the millionaire laughed. It was true. His culinary attempts were disastrous, but he had rediscovered the pleasure of telling stories, something he had done countless times for his son decades ago. The moment of levity was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. It was from the hospital. The grandmother had awakened briefly and was asking to see her granddaughter. Amidst a security detail worthy of heads of state, they managed to reach the hospital without being intercepted by the press. A secondary entrance and isolated corridors allowed them to reach the ICU room with discretion. The old woman was conscious, but visibly weak. Her face lit up when she saw her granddaughter, who ran to hug her carefully, respecting the tubes and wires that surrounded her. "My little one," whispered the grandmother, caressing the child's hair. "I see you've discovered the truth." "Tom," girl nodded. "He's my real grandfather." "Yes," confirmed the old woman, "your father's father, a good man." Her eyes met the millionaire's over the child's head. "A man who will take very good care of you." There was something definitive in those words, a passing of responsibility that made the millionaire swallow hard. "Grandma, you're going to get better soon, right?" asked the girl, the hope shining through in every word. The old woman smiled weakly. "I'll try, my love. But if Grandma needs to rest, you won't be alone. Never again." The doctor entered discreetly, signaling that the visit needed to be brief. The millionaire realized how much the conversation had drained the old woman's strength. "Let's let your grandmother rest a bit," he suggested gently. "We can come back later." The girl nodded, giving her grandmother a kiss on the forehead before picking up her doll. "Take care of her?" asked the old woman to the millionaire when the child had already left with the nurse, "as if she were your own daughter." "With my life," he promised, holding her fragile hand between his. The next morning, promptly at 9 a.m., the millionaire and his legal team appeared at the hearing at Child Protective Services. The press crowded at the entrance, kept at a distance by security guards. Inside, counselors, social workers, and representatives from the juvenile court awaited to determine the girl's future. The palpable tension in the room only increased when the doors opened and an unknown man entered, accompanied by his own team of lawyers. "Who are you?" asked the millionaire, rising immediately. The man smiled coldly. "I am the child's maternal uncle, brother of the deceased mother, and I have come to claim custody of my niece." "Maternal uncle?" The millionaire stared at the man with suspicion. "Why are you appearing only now after 6 years?" The newcomer maintained his calculated smile. "I was working abroad. I only learned of the situation from the newspapers." He turned to the counselors. "As a direct blood relative, I have legal priority in the custody of the child." "A strange coincidence," commented the millionaire's lawyer, "to appear just when we discovered that the girl is the granddaughter of one of the richest men in the country." The chairman of the board banged the gavel, calling for order. "This is not a formal hearing, but a preliminary assessment of the situation. Everyone will have the opportunity to speak." In the next 90 minutes, reports were presented, arguments exposed, documents analyzed. The millionaire watched the supposed uncle with growing certainty of his true intentions. In the man's eyes, there was no genuine affection, only the same cold ambition that he himself had seen so many times in the mirror years ago. "I request that a DNA test be done to confirm the alleged kinship," proposed the millionaire's lawyer. "Obviously," agreed the supposed uncle with excessive ease. "I also ask for an evaluation of the suitability of the environment offered by the grandfather." The way he pronounced the word carried a subtle insinuation of doubt. After all, a single man, occupied with his business, with no experience with children. "Are you married?" questioned the millionaire directly. "Divorced," replied the man with an almost imperceptible hesitation. "And do you have children?" "No." "So, your experience with children is—" The man blushed slightly. "I have nephews and nieces." Where are you currently employed?" "Between jobs," he admitted, uncomfortable. The social worker who was following the case raised her hand. "If you allow me, I would like to hear the child herself. I have spoken extensively with her in recent weeks, and I believe that her opinion should be considered." The girl was brought into the room, accompanied by the council's psychologist. Her eyes lit up when she saw the millionaire, running to sit beside him, the rag doll, as always, firmly in her hands. "Hello," greeted the supposed uncle in an artificially sweet voice. "You don't know me, but I'm your mother's brother, your uncle." The child examined him with the disconcerting frankness typical of childhood. "My grandma never said I had an uncle." A heavy silence fell over the room. The man cleared his throat. "Well, we were distant, but now I want to take care of you." "Did you know my mother?" asked the girl directly. "Of course, we were very close." "What was her favorite color?" The man hesitated. "Blue?" The girl shook her head negatively. "Grandma said it was yellow, like sunflowers." "Nay." The millionaire watched the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The child was conducting her own little interrogation with surprising cunning. "Good," interjected the chairman of the board. "Let's proceed with the formal evaluation. The court will determine temporary custody while the DNA tests are performed," and he was interrupted when the door opened abruptly. A nurse entered, breathless. "Sorry for the intrusion," she said, addressing the millionaire. "It's urgent. The girl's grandmother—" He stood up in a flash, his heart racing. "What happened?" "She's lucid, sir, and she insists on speaking with the board. She says she has crucial information about the case." 15 minutes later, a technological apparatus had been set up in the hearing room. On the large screen, the old woman's face appeared, pale but determined, transmitted directly from the ICU. "I appreciate the opportunity," she began in a weak voice. "I fear I don't have much time, so I will be direct." Her eyes fixed on the supposed uncle. "This man is not my daughter's brother. She was an only child." A murmur swept through the room. The man paled visibly. "I have here," continued the grandmother, raising an envelope with trembling hands, "my daughter's diary. She describes her relationship with the millionaire's son and specifically mentions having no siblings or other living relatives besides me." The supposed uncle stood up, babbling protests, but the damage was done. The chairman of the board ordered an immediate investigation into his identity. Despite the tension, the millionaire laughed. It was true. His culinary attempts were disastrous, but he had rediscovered the pleasure of telling stories, something he had done countless times for his son decades ago. The moment of levity was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. It was from the hospital. The grandmother had awakened briefly and was asking to see her granddaughter. Amidst a security detail worthy of heads of state, they managed to reach the hospital without being intercepted by the press. A secondary entrance and isolated corridors allowed them to reach the ICU room with discretion. The old woman was conscious but visibly weak. Her face lit up when she saw her granddaughter, who ran to hug her carefully, respecting the tubes and wires that surrounded her. "My little one," whispered the grandmother, caressing the child's hair. "I see you've discovered the truth." The girl nodded. "He's my real grandfather." "Yes," confirmed the old woman. "Your father's father. A good man." Her eyes met the millionaire's over the child's head. "A man who will take very good care of you." There was something definitive in those words, a passing of responsibility that made the millionaire swallow hard. "Grandma, you're going to get better soon, right?" asked the girl, the hope shining through in every word. The old woman smiled weakly. "I'll try, my love. But if Grandma needs to rest, you won't be alone. Never again." The doctor entered discreetly, signaling that the visit needed to be brief. The millionaire realized how much the conversation had drained the old woman's strength. "Let's let your grandmother rest a bit," he suggested gently. "We can come back later." The girl nodded, giving her grandmother a kiss on the forehead before picking up her doll. "Take care of her," asked the old woman to the millionaire when the child had already left with the nurse. "As if she were your own daughter." "With my life," he promised, holding her fragile hand between his. The next morning, promptly at 9 a.m., the millionaire and his legal team appeared at the hearing at Child Protective Services. The press crowded. At the entrance, kept at a distance by security guards. Inside, counselors, social workers, and representatives from the juvenile court awaited to determine the girl's future. The palpable tension in the room only increased when the doors opened and an unknown man entered, accompanied by his own team of lawyers. "Who are you?" asked the millionaire, rising immediately. The man smiled coldly. "I am the child's maternal uncle, brother of the deceased mother, and I have come to claim custody of my niece." "Maternal uncle?" The millionaire stared at the man with suspicion. "Why are you appearing only now after 6 years?" The newcomer maintained his calculated smile. "I was working abroad. I only learned of the situation from the newspapers. He turned to the councillors. As a direct blood relative, I have legal priority in the custody of the child. A strange coincidence, commented the millionaire's lawyer, to appear just when we discovered that the girl is the granddaughter of one of the richest men in the country. The chairman of the board banged the gavel, calling for order. This is not a formal hearing, but a preliminary assessment of the situation. Everyone will have the opportunity to speak. In the next 90 minutes, reports were presented, arguments exposed, documents analyzed. The millionaire watched the supposed uncle with growing certainty of his true intentions. In the man's eyes, there was no genuine affection, only the same cold ambition that he himself had seen so many times in the mirror years ago. I request that a DNA test be done to confirm the alleged kinship, proposed the millionaire's lawyer. Obviously, agreed the supposed uncle with excessive ease. I also ask for an evaluation of the suitability of the environment offered by the grandfather. The way he pronounced the word carried a subtle insinuation of doubt. After all, a single man occupied with his business, with no experience with children. Are you married? Questioned the millionaire directly. Divorced, replied the man, with an almost imperceptible hesitation. And do you have children? No. So your experience with children is... The man blushed slightly. I have nephews and nieces. Where are you currently employed? Between jobs, he admitted, uncomfortable. The social worker who was following the case raised her hand. If you allow me, I would like to hear the child herself. I have spoken extensively with her in recent weeks, and I believe that her opinion should be considered. The girl was brought into the room, accompanied by the council's psychologist. Her eyes lit up when she saw the millionaire running to sit beside him, the rag doll, as always, firmly in her hands. Hello, greeted the supposed uncle in an artificially sweet voice. You don't know me, but I'm your mother's brother, your uncle. The child examined him with the disconcerting frankness typical of childhood. My grandma never said I had an uncle. A heavy silence fell over the room. The man cleared his throat. Well, we were distant, but now I want to take care of you. Did you know my mother? Asked the girl directly. Of course, we were very close. What was her favorite color? The man hesitated. Blue. The girl shook her head negatively. Grandma said it was yellow, like sunflowers. The millionaire watched the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The child was conducting her own little interrogation with surprising cunning. Good, interjected the chairman of the board. Let's proceed with the formal evaluation. The court will determine temporary custody while the DNA tests are performed and... He was interrupted. When the door opened abruptly, a nurse entered, breathless. Sorry for the intrusion, she said, addressing the millionaire. It's urgent. The girl's grandmother... He stood up in a flash, his heart racing. What happened? She's lucid, sir, and she insists on speaking with the board. She says she has crucial information about the case. 15 minutes later, a technological apparatus had been set up in the hearing room. On the large screen, the old woman's face appeared pale but determined, transmitted directly from the ICU. I appreciate the opportunity, she began in a weak voice. I fear I don't have much time, so I will be direct. Her eyes fixed on the supposed uncle. This man is not my daughter's brother. She was an only child. A murmur swept through the room. The man paled visibly. I have here, continued the grandmother, raising an envelope with trembling hands, my daughter's diary. She describes her relationship with the millionaire's son, and specifically mentions having no siblings or other living relatives besides me. The supposed uncle stood up, babbling protests, but the damage was done. The chairman of the board ordered an immediate investigation into his identity. The grandmother continued, now addressing the millionaire directly. In recent months, I have seen how you have transformed for the love of my granddaughter. I have seen the man behind the fortune, behind the power. I have seen a grandfather reborn from the ashes of loneliness. Tears sparkled in the old woman's eyes. My daughter would have approved. Your son would have approved. I ask the board to consider not only the blood tie, which we now know exists, but the bond of love that has formed. A bond that no money can buy or falsify. A respectful silence dominated the room when she finished. The girl, who had watched everything with attentive eyes, approached the screen, touching it gently where the grandmother's face was. I love you, Grandma, she said simply. I love you too, my little one, replied the old woman with a tired smile. More than anything in this world. 2 days later, in a private ceremony, the millionaire officially received temporary custody of the girl, pending only the final formalities for definitive adoption. The supposed uncle had disappeared after they discovered that he was a con artist with an extensive criminal record. Upon leaving the courthouse, a crowd of reporters awaited. The millionaire lifted the child into his arms, protecting her from the flashes as they walked to the car. Can we visit Grandma now? Asked the girl. Of course, he agreed, settling her into the seat. On the way to the hospital, they both knew, without needing to say it out loud, that this would probably be a farewell. The grandmother, having fulfilled her final mission to protect her granddaughter, now surrendered to the weariness of a life of struggles. 6 months had passed since the grandmother had departed. The pain of the loss was slowly giving way to sweet memories, carefully preserved by both the millionaire and the girl. In the child's room, now decorated with vibrant colors and books, the photograph of the old woman occupied a prominent place next to the bed, along with the original rag doll, now accompanied by dozens of other toys, but still the favorite, still the most loved. The mansion that for so long had been a mausoleum of painful memories had transformed into a home. Laughter echoed through the once silent corridors. Colorful drawings decorated the door of the stainless steel refrigerator. Muddy footprints occasionally marked the Italian marble of the entrance hall, to the dismay of the housekeeper and the secret delight of the millionaire. On that sunny Sunday morning, he watched his granddaughter playing in the garden through the window of his office. Dressed in simple overalls, she ran barefoot through the grass, chasing butterflies with the uncomplicated joy that only children possess. The final adoption documents, sir, announced his assistant, placing a folder on the table. They just need your signature. The millionaire nodded, picking up the pen. Although the child was biologically his granddaughter, formal adoption would guarantee all the legal rights and protection she deserved. The DNA investigation had confirmed the kinship, but in the eyes of the law, the bond needed to be officialized. The foundation ceremony is confirmed for Tuesday, continued the assistant. All the media outlets have confirmed attendance. And what about the land? Construction on the community center has already begun. The daycare and the health clinic should be ready in 6 months. The millionaire smiled, satisfied. The land where he had found his granddaughter and her grandmother living in that precarious shack was now transforming into a social assistance complex. The first of many projects of the Rebirth Foundation, named in honor of the grandmother, who with her silent dignity had taught him more about real values than all the board meetings he had ever attended. "Daddy!" The child's voice called him from the office door. Although technically he was Grandpa, the girl had started calling him Dad spontaneously a few months ago, and he hadn't had the heart to correct her. In his heart, he was already much more than a grandfather. He was everything she had in the world. "Look what I found," she exclaimed, running in and displaying a small blue feather. "It's the same color as the sky." "It's beautiful," he agreed, examining the treasure with the seriousness that the discovery deserved. "Where did you find it?" "Near the fountain. I think it's from a magic bird." "A magic bird? And what kind of magic does it do?" The girl considered the question seriously. "It grants wishes," she decided finally, "but only good wishes that come from the heart." The millionaire smiled, feeling a wave of tenderness. "And what would your wish be?" he asked softly. The child looked at the feather, then at the portrait of her grandmother on the shelf, and finally at the man who was now her world. "I don't have any wishes now," she replied with the surprising wisdom that she sometimes demonstrated. "I already have everything I need." Picking her up, the millionaire felt the small arms wrap around his neck in a tight hug. The scent of children's shampoo and the warmth of that little body against his provoked a lump in his throat. "You know," he began when he managed to control his emotion, "your grandmother told me something important before she passed. Something I'll never forget." "What did she say?" asked the girl curiously. "She said that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what really matters." He adjusted a strand of hair behind the child's ear. "For years, I thought that success was measured by the money we accumulate, by the power we exercise over others. I was so wrong." The girl listened attentively, her eyes fixed on his. "The true wealth," he continued, "is having someone to love, someone who waits for us at the end of the day, someone who makes our house a home. Like me and you," she concluded, simply. "Exactly like me and you." Outside, the spring sun bathed the garden in golden light. On the street beyond the gates of the mansion, the city continued its frenetic rhythm. Businesses were closed, fortunes made and lost, powers exchanged hands. The world that for so long had defined the millionaire's existence continued without him. And for the first time in decades, that didn't bother him in the least. His phone rang. It was the number of the director of the newly opened children's hospital with his donation. "I can return the call later," he said to his assistant, still holding the girl in his arms. "It's about the oncology ward," replied the assistant. "They need your approval for the increase in beds." The millionaire hesitated for only a second. "Tell them I approve. Double the number originally planned." While the assistant left to make the call, the girl played distractedly with her adoptive father's tie. "You know what else Grandma used to tell me?" she asked suddenly. "What?" "That Mommy said my father was a prince." She smiled shyly. "And that one day the king of the kingdom would come to get us." The millionaire felt tears threatening to form. "Your mother was right. Your father was truly a prince, the best man I ever knew. And you're the king," she concluded, with the simple logic of childhood. "The king who came to get us, like in the story." "No," he corrected gently. "I was just a very lost man who you found and saved." He put her back on the ground and, taking the blue feather, helped her to store it, carefully in a small box where she collected her treasures. "Can we visit Grandma today?" asked the girl. That's what she called the weekly visits to the cemetery, where they brought flowers and told her the news, as if her grandmother could hear, and perhaps she could, in some way that adults don't understand, but children intuit. "Of course," he agreed. "We'll take sunflowers. They were her favorites, weren't they?" The girl nodded vigorously. "And my mom's too." Together, hand in hand, they walked out into the sunny garden. The rag doll, as always, accompanied them, a silent reminder of the day their lives crossed under a light drizzle, when a desperate child offered her only treasure, and a man hardened by life rediscovered the meaning of love. The millionaire, now simply a father, could not imagine a richer, fuller, more meaningful life through the eyes of his daughter, because that's what she had become in his heart. The world had regained colors, sounds, and magic that he had long forgotten. And the most valuable lesson he had learned was priceless and could not be deposited in any bank. True fortune is not measured by what we possess, but by who we love and by who loves us back. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.